Good evening. I'm Spot On Weather meteorologist Matthew Euler, and welcome to the Spot On Weather Teleconnections discussion for Friday, 3 December 2021. Kicking things off on tonight's video, we take a look at the 500 millibar, or about 18,000 feet above the surface. We take a look at these height anomalies for the 3rd of December. And in general, I'm going to go ahead and brief that graphic on the left from west to east, left to right. In general, as a reminder on the coloring there on that graphic on the left, green coloring, blue coloring, that generally indicates a trough, which is an area of lower heights in the atmosphere. The white shading as well as the orange and maroon colors indicate upper level ridge. An upper level ridge which is associated with higher heights in the atmosphere, and typically troughs are associated with more stormy and cooler weather, and then the ridges are associated with drier and warmer weather. So moving from west to east or left to right at this, looking at this graphic, generally we start off in Siberia, and in general, let me go ahead and get my my little utensil out here so we can point the features out. Okay, so starting from west to east, we initially have this upper level ridge which is poking its way northward over central Siberia. Downstream of that ridge, we have this upper level trough which is positioned over the western Pacific Ocean into Japan. And then we have another upper level ridge that is building across the north central Pacific, and it's extending northward there, north of the Aleutian Islands into the Bering Sea. Downstream of that, or to the east of that particular feature, we have an upper level trough. An upper level trough in the Gulf of Alaska and the northeastern Pacific Ocean. And then we have a closed low, which is located generally to the south-southwest of that trough, south-southwest of the Gulf of Alaska. Generally, over the south-central Pacific, we have this closed low. And, you know, it's really interesting weather right now in the Hawaiian Islands. In fact, they have a winter storm watch in effect for the Big Island up at the higher elevations where they can get up to a foot of snowfall. A foot of snowfall with colder air aloft over the Big Island right now. And the winds could be gusting up to 100 miles per hour. So I saw this discussion yesterday from one of the Weather Service locations or sites saying 2 locations in the United States territory that had winter storm watches were Alaska, which you'd expect this time of year in early December, but also Hawaii. So that was a very unique situation, obviously. All right, so continuing on with our discussion of these 500 millibar height anomalies, these ridges and troughs, we have an area of upper level higher heights, a little bit of ridging there along the U.S. West Coast. And the way these black lines, these height contours are packed, this is indicative of very strong winds in the upper atmosphere. And in general, this is the location of your jet stream. And in general, we have a little bit of ridging there along the U.S. West Coast. And then we have more of a zonal west to east flow from the Pacific Northwest extending to the Midwest. And then we have an upper level trough over eastern Canada extending southward into New England. There is a little bit of weak troughing off the eastern seaboard as well. And then finally, working our way out into the Atlantic Ocean, we have an upper level ridge, which is generally located in the northeast Atlantic. We have areas of lower pressure or lower heights across the Greenland area. And then we have a deep trough extending from Norway, Sweden, and Finland south-southwestward into west central Europe at the present time. So a lot is going on. In fact, this trough in Europe has, especially up toward Finland, Sweden, and Norway, have some of the coldest temperatures in the northern hemisphere right now, between northern Europe there and then also into Canada and, of course, the Arctic, parts of Siberia. These locations have some of the coldest air right now across the northern hemisphere. So just get you from this map gets you familiarized with what's going on in the upper level flow, the pattern. Now let's move on to a discussion of the Madden-Julian oscillation, these phases, the MJO phases. Again, as a reminder, the MJO ranges from phases 1 to 8. Phases 8 is generally associated with convection or upward vertical motion. They're off the west coast of South Africa. Phase 1 is associated with convection to the east of South Africa, around Madagascar. Phases 2 and 3, we would have upward vertical motion or convection in the Indian Ocean. 4 and 5, whenever MJO is in those areas, that indicates upward vertical motion or convection on the maritime continent. 6 and 7, generally that indicates convection out in the western Pacific Ocean, followed by phase 8, which indicates upward vertical motion or convection along the dateline, 180 degrees west longitude. So let's take a look now at the Pacific satellite for today's date on 3 December 2021, generally showing a lot of clouds here on the infrared image. We have an area of lower pressure, generally located over the central Pacific, and we have a large band here extending basically from the deep tropics all the way up towards western Canada, towards British Columbia. We have an area of fair weather off the coast of Southern California. And then if we move further westward in the Pacific Ocean, and I'm going to show you this in a minute where the MJO phase currently is located, but you notice a lot of these thunderstorm clusters, okay, especially out over the western Pacific Ocean, just to the east of the Philippines, even over parts of the southern tip of the Philippines, as well as working their way closer towards Malaysia. And then in general, this is the remnants of a typhoon that is being picked up by the mid-latitude westerlies. You can kind of see how this cloud feature is being stretched to the northeast of this former typhoon, which is accelerating quickly to the northeast at the present time, again getting caught up in the mid-latitude westerlies. This is the upper level low feature that is located generally, let's see, this is about the south central Pacific Ocean area here. So you kind of see that comma shape here, the cloud structure. So overall, I wanted to really get at the fact, when we talk about MJO, we want to look at where the greatest amount of convection is occurring. And right now we have a lot of convection in the western Pacific. And this is associated with MJO phase 6. So the MJO has come to life over the last 2 weeks since I did my last video. If we look at the temperature composites for December, January, and February here on the left, showing you phases 1 in the upper left to phase 8 in the bottom right. And generally, what we're looking at in the forecast of the GFS ensemble, this runs out through 16 December 2021. Right now, we're currently situated in MJO phase 6. And you notice this green line here, this is the NCEP GFS ensemble forecasting system. The forecast calls for the MJO to pivot its way toward phase 7. Now you notice phases 6 and phases 7 are associated with the convection in the western Pacific Ocean. And there you go. And it verifies very well. We're in phase 6 right now, and look where the convection is occurring over the western Pacific Ocean. And so phase 6, now if we look at these temperature composites for December, January, and February, if you're a fan of winter weather in the eastern United States, you want cold and you want snow, we need the MJO to be in phases 8, 1, and 2. You notice the blue shading, that indicates below normal temperatures, colder temperatures. Now, we are currently operating in phase 6, and that is synonymous with very mild temperatures from the Midwestern U.S. to the East Coast. Phase 7, you still have the mild air lingering, but it's not as significant. And then if we moved into rotated into phase 8, here 8 or 1, that would be the convection in the Western Hemisphere in Africa. That would give us cold temperatures in the east. So right now, the MJO, for the longest time, I did a bunch of videos here before Thanksgiving holiday. The MJO was generally in this small inner circle at the center of the phase diagram. And that is indicative of a null phase. But the convection has again come to life as indicated by this satellite image today. And you see where the MJO is sitting right now. Milder eastern U.S. phases 6 and 7. Now if we look at the GFS operational model, that's the NCEP GFS, that's the aqua color line here. Similar to the NCEP GEFS, the ensemble forecasting system, where we have a phase 6 for today's date here on 3 December 2021, and then it's working its way towards phase 7 and actually gets stronger in magnitude, greater in magnitude here as we work our way to middle December. Now, one other thing I want to mention as a reminder, I've mentioned this in previous videos, the further away these lines get, the forecast for the MJO, the further away they get from this inner center little small circle, the greater the strength of the MJO. So right now, the GFS operational through 17 December, forecasting phase 6 currently, transitioning to phase 7. The Navy ESPC MJO phase diagram forecast, generally keeping the MJO, by the way, this is the ensemble mean, of the 16 members, I believe it was. In general, it's keeping the MJO forecast pretty much near the inner circle there at the center. That's forecasting a null phase. Now, by the way, this particular diagram goes all the way out through the new year, through 11 January. So, real interesting stuff. Now, there are some members, these lighter green lines, that are showing MJO phases 6 and 7, similar to NCEP GFS and NCEP GEFS. Looking at the latest La Nina update, okay, we still see these blue shading colors here in the eastern, equatorial, eastern, and central Pacific. This is the La Nina signature that we typically see. And right now in the Nino 3.4 region, we're looking at a 0.83 degrees Celsius below normal water temperature. And that's indicative of a weak La Nina. Additionally, we have cooler than normal water that remains across the far northern reaches up into the Bering Sea, as well as the Gulf of Alaska and Northeast Pacific. One thing I have noted that has changed over the last 2 to 3 weeks is you see these orange coloring, these lighter orange coloring, that has now extended from the north central Pacific, where it was much above normal water. It's now kind of moved closer to the U.S. West Coast. So we don't completely see that blue horseshoe shape of a negative PDO, Pacific Decadal Oscillation. It's still there, but we are starting to see some of this warmer water get pushed closer to the U.S. West Coast, and that could be due to the storm activity, generally with the jet stream really kicking up in strength and pushing these fairly deep storm systems from west to east across the North Pacific. So in general, we got warmer than normal water extending back towards the western Pacific and the southwestern Pacific, and this is a typical La Nina signature, where you get the cooler than normal water in the eastern Pacific and you get the warmer than normal water out in the western Pacific. Okay, as far as the latest value for the Nino 3.4 region, as far as water temperature, this is your water trace in degrees Celsius. These are your departures from normal. Generally, if you're sitting at the 0 line here down the center, that means that your water temperatures are right where they should be based on climatology. But if you look, over time, we've seen since early September a steady decline in the water temperatures in the Nino 3.4 region. And in general, we reached a peak of about -1 degrees Celsius in that Nino 3.4 region back in early November. Then we had a little bit of a warming that occurred going in towards mid-November, and then it kind of has leveled off for the most part since about the 18th of November to present time, the last 2 weeks. These water temperatures have remained fairly consistent, a little bit of cooling, then a little bit of warming, then cooling again. But I'm really interested in watching this and keep an eye on this, because this is going, the weaker this La Nina, the less dominant that La Nina is going to be this winter season. And in fact, I did compare the water temperatures in the Nino 3.4 region this year to last year at the same time. And this is actually a weaker La Nina up to this point as compared to last year. Last year we were already sitting colder than -1 degree Celsius down below in this area. So we do have a weaker La Nina to this point so far this year. Looking at intensity classifications again, just as a reminder, in general, a weak La Nina occurs when water temperatures are 0.5 to 0.9 degrees Celsius below normal, and we're sitting at 0.83 right now, so we sit right in that weak area. If we exceed 0.9 degrees Celsius, then we're going to get closer to moderate La Nina. with moderate La Nina generally going from 1.0 to 1.4 degrees Celsius below normal. And then a strong La Nina occurs when the water temperatures are between 1.5 to 1.9 degrees Celsius below normal in the Nino 3.4 region, which I'm showing what that looks like right here. This is your Nino 3.4 region. And then these are the actual latitude and longitude lines, the box that bounds that particular area. All right, so now let's look at the teleconnections. Let's start with the Arctic Oscillation forecast. And I'm not going to spoil what I'm going to get into in the summary, but let's just start with the AO. I don't want to get too far ahead of myself. But yeah, this is a definite case tonight of what's known as constructive interference, where all of the teleconnections work towards one general outcome. They all favor a certain outcome. So let's take a look at this. The AO, again, as a reminder, negative AO is on the left and the positive AO is on the right. So there's major differences in the pattern. If you like cold in the eastern U.S., you want to see a negative AO. And the negative AOs usually occur with a weakened polar vortex. And by the way, hint, hint, the polar vortex is currently strong. So that should probably give you an idea of what we're going to cover tonight for the AO. But in general, big differences in the positioning of the jet stream. Much colder air is allowed to move further south into the United States during negative AO conditions. And then on the right, with a positive AO, we have areas of lower pressure or lower heights where they should be, up towards the Arctic region, with the coldest air remaining over the Arctic areas and a more west-to-east zonal jet stream with a positive AO. So now let's take a look at the forecast. Now this is the European deterministic AO forecast. Generally showing here, we're on 3 December, we're at 3 December right now. So we're sitting at a positive AO right now. We're expecting that positive AO to remain all the way through mid-December. And this is due to a stronger stratospheric polar vortex. If we look at the European EPS AO 50 perturbed members, similar story here. But look at the green line. This is the ensemble mean, the green line. And even the control is the white line. In general, what we're looking at is a positive AO right on through 18 December, which that's the farthest this particular model goes out right now. We look at the European EPS AO 50 perturbed members. Pay attention to the ensemble mean line here. This is the average of all the model members. Generally showing a positive phase to the AO, occasionally dipping down closer to neutral just after the Christmas holiday, and then back up positive again. But look at the trend, positive, positive, positive. Maybe neutral again as we get towards the new year. The GFS deterministic AO forecast on 3 December, positive, okay? And it remains positive. Follow that white line here, these white circular line, before dipping possibly to negative after mid-December. And we'll have to wait to see how that occurs. But again, as I mentioned in previous videos, the GFS deterministic model tends to be a lot more all over the place. The NSAP GEFS V12, Arctic Oscillation 30 perturbed members forecast. Follow that green line, and you see it's in the positive territory. And it remains that way all the way out through 19 December. So overall, we're looking at a positive AO. Now, what about the North Atlantic Oscillation, NAO? Positive phase demonstrated here on the left and a negative NAO phase on the right, generally showing a more flat west-to-east zonal jet stream with a positive NAO phase, coldest air remaining up over the northern latitudes, milder conditions over the mid-latitudes with a positive NAO phase, a lack of blocking across the northwestern Atlantic, and the jet stream generally moves west to east. So we really don't get a lot of intrusion of Arctic air in the eastern U.S. with a positive NAO, with a lack of blocking upstream of a trough. The negative NAO phase, we get a much more amplified or digging jet stream, which allows colder air to funnel down north of the jet stream axis right on into the eastern U.S. And then we have this huge blocking ridge that typically works its way back towards either northeastern Canada or Greenland with a negative NAO. And then we have this dip in the jet stream once more into the British Isles, into northwestern Europe. And in fact, recently we had a fairly significant negative NAO or a blocking pattern in the northwestern Atlantic, which allowed very cold air to penetrate pretty much on due northerly winds into Western Europe, including England, and definitely right now over Finland, Sweden, and Norway. Let's take a look at the forecast now. European deterministic NAO forecast. 3 December, we're sitting positive, and it dips closer to neutral around the 5th of December this Sunday, but then back up positive, maybe close to neutral again. Overall, positive to occasionally neutral right on through the 13th of December. European EPS NAO 50 perturbed members. If you look at the green ensemble mean forecast, as well as the control, both forecasting a positive phase right on through 18 December. The European EPS NAO 50 perturbed members, you pay attention to the green line. Notice it's positive right on close to the Christmas holiday. Then it dips slightly negative, and then back positive as we head into the new year, and then back to neutral territory. The GFS deterministic NAO forecast showing positive, dipping back closer to neutral, and then positive, neutral, positive, slightly positive, and then back more significantly positive as we head to mid-December. The NCEP GEFS V12 NAO 30 perturbed members showing a general positive tendency, this green line here, the ensemble mean, generally positive NAO right on through the 19th of December. So, in general, in review, we have a positive Arctic oscillation, we have a mainly positive, occasionally neutral North Atlantic oscillation. What about the Pacific side? What about the Pacific teleconnections? The P&A forecast. Here's a review of the P&A pattern. Generally, with a positive P&A, we get increased chances of below normal temperatures across the eastern U.S. With the region being on the western fringes of a below normal temperature area. So generally, with a positive P&A pattern, you get a huge ridge over the western U.S. into Canada. Sometimes it goes all the way up to Alaska with warmer than normal temperatures and dry conditions, and a downstream trough with much colder conditions and stormier conditions for the eastern U.S. with a positive P&A. Now, a negative P&A here on the bottom right generally shows a reverse. We have a trough across the western U.S. and colder and unsettled weather there, and then downstream of that trough we have this orange shading, which represents warmer than normal temperatures and usually associated with an upper level ridge with a negative P&A. Now let's look at the forecast. The European deterministic P&A forecast, generally for today, 3 December, we're in negative territory. And guess what? It goes further negative, generally down to a magnitude of -3 before kind of recovering a little bit to -2, but then back down to -3 again around the 10th of December before slowly climbing back towards neutral. European EPS P&A 50 perturbed members. This isn't even close to positive. This is strictly negative through 18 December on this model. Looking at the European EPS P&A 50 perturbed members, negative. Slightly, the climb is there around 5 January after the new year begins, but not really. The magnitude decreases a little bit to -1 from -3 to -1, but in general, we're sitting negative all the way out through 16 January. The GFS deterministic P&A forecast, negative all the way through 20 December. The NCEP GEFS V12 P&A 30 perturbed members, negative all the way through 19 December. And this isn't even moving up close to neutral on this particular model, the GEFS V12. And now let's move on to the Eastern Pacific Oscillation forecast, EPO. A negative EPO, the pressure patterns there, your synoptic features on the left, and then a positive EPO on the right. Generally a negative EPO. If you want cold in the east, you want a negative EPO. You get this huge upper level ridge in the Gulf of Alaska. You get these rising heights, and then downstream of those rising heights you get this trough, and the jet stream takes a major digging configuration with Arctic air and Arctic high pressure able to slide southeast, with these Arctic cold shots across the Midwest, the Northern Plains, spreading towards the East Coast with a negative EPO. Positive EPO, not the case. You get milder west to east zonal jet stream, and you also get milder Pacific air from west to east coast in the United States. So a good chunk of the United States tends to be mild in a positive EPO. So what's the forecast? European deterministic EPO forecast. We are starting off negative today on the 3rd of December. It does drop a little further negative by Sunday the 5th, but then it goes and climbs pretty significantly to the positive side by 8 and 9 December, and then remains generally positive right on out through 13 December. European EPS, EPO 50 perturbed members, starting off negative right on through the 6th of December, and then just positive. Maybe by the 18th of December, it starts trending more towards neutral conditions, so we'll have to watch that. The European EPS, EPO 50 perturbed members, negative, but then look at this crazy climb to positive up to a magnitude of +4 by the 12th of December, dropping back down towards neutral by the 20th of December as we get close to the winter solstice, and then towards neutral territory, right on into early January, then slightly negative again after that. The GFS deterministic EPO forecast showing a negative tendency today, lasting right on through the 6th of December, then climbing back positive after the 6th of December. And then the NCEP GEFS V12 EPO 30 perturbed members showing a negative tendency to the EPO, eventually climbing towards neutral by between the 6th and the 7th of December, then positive, and wow, look how sharply positive this EPO becomes according to this model, right between the 11th and 12th of December. But generally, we're looking at a positive trend after this brief negative tendency. All right, so now let's talk about this QBO, the quasi-biennial oscillation. And in general, what we're looking at here is the latest sounding on the right at Singapore. This is a raw wind sound observation where you launch a weather balloon, release that weather balloon, it ascends high up in the atmosphere. In this case, the trace, the upper air trace, goes all the way up to 10 millibar level, which is about 18 miles above the Earth's surface. And generally, when you launch these weather balloons, they give the winds, direction, and speed. They give you the temperature, they give you the humidity as a balloon ascends in the vertical in the atmosphere. So they're very useful to be able to have these RAOBs, these raw wind sound observations, to kind of see how the wind profile is. Now, if we look at this particular diagram for QBO and we assess it, generally the zero vertical line here, right down the middle, anything to the left of that, so like this blue, these points here that were plotted and then connected, anything left of this zero line, this vertical line down the middle, that indicates a negative QBO. Those are negative values associated with a easterly phase or negative QBO. If the blue line, this blue line were to go more to the right in the positive territory, that would be indicative of more of a westerly based QBO or positive phase. So right now you can see between just it's about 12 to 13 millibar level, high up in the upper atmosphere, descending downward to around 50 millibars, we are sitting in an easterly phase QBO. All right, and why is that important? We talk about this a lot, but it favors colder temperatures in the eastern U.S. and a weakening stratospheric polar vortex in winter. Multiple researchers have looked at this, and this is the conclusion. All right, again, with negative QBO winters, if the values are between negative 10 and negative 15 during the months of December, January, and February, we generally get this colder than normal, these colder than normal temperatures. This is in degrees Celsius. These are departures from normal. Okay, you see the milder green and yellow colors are all over the U.S. West Coast. All right, so we know the QBO is negative. We've talked about the other teleconnections, which we'll do a nice summary at the end, and then we'll tell you, what we expect. But before we get to that, we're going to talk about the polar vortex, and we're also going to take a look at the latest ensemble runs for the European ensemble prediction system as well as the GFS ensemble prediction system. All right, so looking at the GFS, the polar vortex update, the graphic on the left is indicative of 10 millibar height anomalies in the stratosphere, or not height anomalies, temperature anomalies in degrees Celsius there in the stratosphere at 10 millibars, 18 miles above the Earth's surface. And you say to yourself, why is it important that I look at the stratospheric temperatures, 10 millibars or 18 miles above where I live here on Earth's surface? It's because these temperature profiles can impact the strength of the polar vortex. So right now, the graphic on the left shows today's date, 3 December 2021. The graphic on the right is the forecast from the GFS model. This is out to Friday, the 10th of December, so 7 days out. Generally, the orange shading on these graphics indicates warming temperatures in the stratosphere. The blue and the green shading indicates colder temperatures in the stratosphere. Normally, with a strong polar vortex, we'd expect the coldest temperatures to encircle the vortex over the Arctic regions. But sometimes you can get these lobes of warmer air, this stratospheric warming, to move over the Arctic, and that tends to disrupt the polar vortex, weaken it, and then that polar vortex either becomes stretched or elongated, or it actually, if the stratospheric warming is strong enough, you get enough upward vertical energy propagating from the troposphere to the stratosphere, get these waves breaking. That can then lead to the vortex not only elongating, but also being broken into two particular vorticity lobes. All right, so right now, today, we're seeing a lot of cool temperatures in the stratosphere like we should. So right now, the polar vortex is in a very strong state. Over time, by next Friday, however, GFS is predicting this warming area to kind of pivot in and move over the Arctic region. These are the legends, by the way, the degrees Celsius temperatures here on the right of each of these graphics. So overall, what we're expecting is stratospheric warming, represented by the orange colors, possible between 5 and 15 December. And again, that could potentially weaken the polar vortex. What about the European model? Very similar. In fact, looking at the European model today, it's actually stronger in its depiction of stratospheric warming. Let's say today here on the left, it's nice and cool by these blue colors. We're looking at temperatures in the stratosphere between -1 and -5 degrees Celsius. And by next Friday, the 10th of December, that's been replaced now by temperatures that are on the order of 13 to 15 degrees Celsius. So we're looking at a change of 15 to 20 degrees Celsius of warming in the stratosphere. Overall, European model, it's showing a greater magnitude of stratospheric warming through mid-December. The GEFS, the GFS Ensemble Forecasting System, again, very similar. This is today, showing the blue, colder temperatures there in the stratosphere. And then here's that area of warming. Not as significant as the European, but still it is a warming area for sure. So GEFS is very similar to GFS as far as the magnitude goes of the stratospheric warming. Now let's take a look at the latest ensemble forecasts. This is 500 millibar heights and anomalies. And then we're looking at the European ensemble prediction system, by the way. This is 500 millibar charts. This is up 18,000 feet above the Earth's surface. So we start off in the upper left on the forecast for this Sunday, 5 December. Upper right will be Tuesday, 7 December forecast. Bottom left is Saturday, 11 December, and bottom right is Tuesday, 14 December. Generally, again, for these charts, just to get you familiar with them, if you see purple shading, if you see green shading, if you see blue shading, that's indicative of upper level troughs. Okay, and that's associated with colder temperatures and with more unsettled conditions. Whereas the oranges, the maroons, and the reds are associated with upper level ridges, associated with dry and above normal temperatures, very mild temperatures with ridges. Okay, so the forecast for this Sunday, the 5th of December, 2021, generally shows an upper level ridge building into just off the U.S. West Coast. We have higher heights. We have a trough that kind of lingers back towards Baja, and then we get this more of a milder west to east zonal jet stream on Sunday, the 5th of December. We got the coldest temperatures over the Arctic region associated with a stronger polar vortex. We got milder conditions beneath that to the south in the mid-latitudes. We look at the forecast for Tuesday, the 7th of December, 2021. Now you see this ridge is still persistent across the eastern Pacific Ocean. If anything, it looks like the highest heights have now retrograded slightly to the west, further off the west coast of the U.S. And so we still have this green shading representing the colder air mass over Alaska, which has been very cold, as well as Canada into central Canada, eastern Canada. We have a trough extending generally from Minnesota down through Nebraska into eastern Colorado and New Mexico by Tuesday the 7th of December. And then we get this ridge that's located upstream of the trough over eastern Canada. We get this upper level ridge that tends to build a little bit there towards southern Greenland. And generally milder conditions here across Florida, southeastern U.S. on Tuesday up to the mid-Atlantic. But there will be a strong surface front that will be pushing through, and that will drop the temperatures behind the front. Bottom left here is the forecast for Saturday next weekend, the 11th of December, showing the orange shading above normal heights and mild conditions along the eastern U.S. And then we have colder than normal weather and trough out towards the northern plain states. And we have a significantly lower or stronger trough there in the Gulf of Alaska. Very cold temperatures once again in Alaska is the forecast for next Saturday, 11 December. In general, you see this upper level ridge there by next Saturday, the 11th, to where it's even further west. And then that ridge generally remains in place. Here in the bottom right-hand graphic on 14 December, the Tuesday the 14th of December forecast, showing a trough extending into western Canada, the Pacific Northwest, with unsettled and colder temperatures. And then we get this nice zonal west to east flow. We got Pacific air pretty much influencing a lot of the United States from the Rockies eastward to the East Coast. Really, this jet stream, there's not a lot of amplitude to it. There's no dipping down of the jet stream in the eastern U.S. So the coldest air with the trough remains well to the northwest out over western Canada at this point. Now let's turn our attention to the GFS ensemble forecasting system, 500 millibar or 500 hectopascal, geopotential height, and anomalies. This is the forecast for this Sunday, the 5th of December, generally showing the same thing where we get this huge upper level ridge, nice strong ridge. Off the U.S. West Coast, you get the main cold air and the troughing over Canada, and then we get a milder, you have a little bit of a ridge there trying to build in northwestward into the East Coast this Sunday. This is the forecast on the upper right for Tuesday the 7th of December on the GFS, the GEFS ensemble forecasting system. The ridge remains over the eastern Pacific, but the problem if you want cold in the east is this ridge is just too far to the west. You notice how the amplitude of the ridge is here. It's located generally extending northeastward with troughing downstream of it, but too far to the west over the western U.S. In milder conditions on the East Coast by Tuesday the 7th of December. But again, we will see a cool down associated with a fairly significant cold front at the surface. Just a brief cool down though. Bottom left here is Saturday, the forecast for Saturday, 11 December, showing that ridge, the southeastern ridge, is basically saying, I am back and I mean business. All right, so what happens is these troughs try to move eastward, but it's running into a brick wall here with this ridge along the East Coast. Those colder air in the trough just can't make it here because the ridge strengthens and builds, and you can see these colorings here, these darker orange shadings indicate anomalously above normal heights. That's mild temperatures. New York City, Boston, Hartford, Providence, right down to Philly, New York City. Looks pretty mild next weekend. And then bottom right shows the forecast for Tuesday, the 14th of December. So what happens is what we're looking at is more of a west to east jet stream across the United States. Excuse me. And we get more mild Pacific air right on into the mid-Atlantic states and again, southeastern U.S. So here's my final thoughts for tonight's Teleconnections discussion. Now, this is interesting here. You're going to laugh at this. I told you at the beginning of the video that the teleconnections are all working with each other in a constructive interference manner. Let's start with the MJO. The Mad-Julian oscillation has been dormant until most recently, where it has become more active over the last 2 weeks. We are in phase 6, transitioning to phase 7 through about the 17th of December, and this is going to favor a ridge and mild temperatures across the eastern U.S. Next, La Nina. La Nina conditions across the equatorial eastern and central Pacific continue. We have a 0.83 degrees Celsius below normal water temperature in Nino 3.4 region. What does La Nina do for us? It favors an upper level ridge and mild temperatures across the eastern U.S. But here's the caveat, and this is what I'm watching closely. The fact that this La Nina still is in weak territory. It's not quite made it to moderate yet. So right now, the weaker the La Nina, just keep this in mind, the less impactful it's going to be on U.S. weather during the winter season. It's just a fact. The stronger this La Nina gets, the greater the impact's going to be with the upper air pattern. And it's going to be, much different story as compared to weak. But in general, the La Nina, regardless, does favor a ridging and mild temps across the eastern U.S. Next, sea surface temperature anomalies. We still continue to see the persistent cooler than normal water across the Gulf of Alaska and the northeastern Pacific. We have warmer than normal water over the north central and western Pacific. This again favors an upper level ridge and mild temps across the eastern U.S. Models are also indicating a positive phase of the Arctic Oscillation right on through middle December. Okay, this is going to favor mild temps across the eastern U.S. when we get these positive phase AOs associated with a stronger polar vortex. You're going to get a much colder Arctic area, lower heights, lower pressure up over the Arctic, and you're going to get higher pressure, higher heights, warmer temperatures across the mid-latitudes with this positive AO. Models are also indicating a positive to neutral trend in the NAO right on through mid-December. And this if it's a positive NAO, there's a lack of blocking in the northwest Atlantic, which generally tends to result in a more flat look jet stream, more zonal, west to east jet stream, milder Pacific air for a large chunk of the country. But in general, if it's positive, we expect mild temperatures across the eastern U.S. If it's neutral, we'd expect closer to average temps. Okay. And then finally, we look at the models. They're indicating now this one's big. We are transitioning to a sharply negative P&A pattern through mid-December. What does that mean? That means a negative P&A favors below normal heights, a trough over the western U.S. and Canada with coldest temperatures, higher than normal heights, upper level ridge in the eastern U.S., and the milder temperatures. Okay, so again, if you want winter weather, not a good thing when you have a negative P&A, especially when, let's go back to it real quick, especially when it is this negative. Okay, this isn't just a weak amplitude phase negative P&A. This is pretty deep in negative territory. And I mean, some of these longer range models, like the EPS, 50% members go all the way out to mid-January, and it stays negative on the latest model run the entire time. So, looking at that, that's something to think about. Also, models are indicating a negative Eastern Pacific Oscillation EPO through 6 December, but it's only brief. And then it transitions to a positive phase EPO from the 7th to the 15th of December. This favors a trough over the Gulf of Alaska. Positive EPO favors mild temps across the eastern U.S. All right. Hopefully you're getting the theme of the Teleconnections discussion this week. And a hint, it is the red font. And it generally begins with mild and ends with eastern U.S. All right, models are also indicating a strong stratospheric polar vortex right on through early December. Now, this is going to favor mild temps across the eastern U.S. all the way out through mid-December, really. Now, models are indicating that potential, as I mentioned, for stratospheric warming to occur, but the after effects typically are not realized until 30 to 45 days after such a warming event. What does that mean for us? So let's just say that the polar vortex, the stratospheric polar vortex, is weakened through these stratospheric warming episode here through mid-December. So let's say we get a warming event in the stratosphere through 15th of December. we're looking at 30 to 45 days after that for any significant pattern changes to take place and a potentially colder regime in the eastern U.S., really. So the overall assessment for tonight's teleconnections discussion, all teleconnections are pointing towards a mild next 2 to 3 weeks across the eastern U.S., definitely through mid-December. Now, there will be, as indicated by the models today, there will be occasional cooldowns. There will be occasional troughs that are going to dig into the east briefly, though. And so one of those troughs and colder temperatures that digs in, the colder temperatures arrive on Tuesday, that's the 7th of December. There's going to be a colder day there. And we're also going to have another cold day potentially around Monday the 13th of December. But these are very short-lived. And then after these move off, the trough lifts out. In these cases, you're going to get right back to mild conditions because we have a strong stratospheric polar vortex, we have a positive AO, and generally a mainly positive NAO. We have a negative PNA, and we have a positive EPO. All right, and then we have La Nina ongoing. All right, so unless the La Nina strengthens significantly, I do not anticipate that being the dominant teleconnection this winter. I just don't see it with a weak phase La Nina. So we can expect above normal temperatures over the next 2 weeks, basically through mid-December. It's looking like above normal temperatures outside of those brief cooldowns and possibly beyond. So even if we see that weakening polar vortex once again, it's going to take some time for those effects to be realized with potentially colder temperatures across the east in January. And we'll continue to keep an eye on that stratospheric warming potential. But, you know, one of the things I was mentioning in my blog today on the Spot on Weather website is the models do a poor job in depicting the after effects of these polar vortex weakening events. So, you know, right now the long-range ensembles, they might not be seeing it yet, is what I'm getting at. So these ensemble models are indicating a pretty much a mild time. I've looked at some of the sub-seasonal models as well, and you know whether you're looking at CFSV2 or whether you're looking at the European model going out 46-day temperature outlook, they've got a mild December, everybody. Just letting you know. They're indicating a mild January, a mild February, with the coldest temperatures remaining up over the Arctic. Now, is that realistic depiction? Probably not, because we know the jet stream and the cold air is eventually going to move south into the U.S. We get a weakening polar vortex and things completely change, where we can definitely get Arctic air down to the lower 48. But in general, you know, it's amazing how pretty much all the teleconnections, MJOs come to life now, are favoring a milder eastern U.S. And yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens as we move our way towards the holiday into the new year. And so I'm keeping a close eye on multiple things, including those temperature anomalies in the Pacific Ocean, the La Nina state. Does it get to moderate or does it stay weak before warming occurs late in the winter? You know, that remains to be seen. I do know, looking at the CFSV2 model, it was forecasting a much stronger La Nina. And it just hasn't materialized according to that model. It was too strong on the La Nina. The water temps were just forecasted to be colder than what they are right now. But all right, that wraps things up tonight. Spot on Weather. It's great to be back. I appreciate everyone's patience. You know, it's been a 2-week hiatus. We did post a video on the interesting temperature trends, record highs and record lows last week. But we want to get back into the teleconnections, back in the swing of things this week with teleconnections and what we're seeing. All right, thank you so much for subscribing to the channel. You know, I do so much talking. I have to drink water here to keep my throat from a tickling effect here. I apologize for the occasional coughing. But again, we'll be keeping track. Follow us on social media, Twitter and Facebook. And I wish everybody a pleasant Friday evening. Stay warm. I know the nights still get quite cold right now as we head into December. We're a couple weeks out from the winter solstice. We definitely have some of the shortest days of the year occurring right now. I hope everybody's in good health, and take care, everybody, and God bless. Until next time.